This is the journal of Rien Prysarnis, a Breton nobleman of House Renthall in High Rock. He has come to Skyrim as part of an audacious and clandestine plot to support the Stormcloak Rebellion, and through their victory in Skyrim, propel House Renthall from a minor holding to an established dynasty. But he never reached his destination. Ambushed while crossing the border, Rien's soldiers, supplies, and support lay in ruins. His capture by the Empire marked the end of his mission before it could begin. However, through the injunction of fate, Rien was sprung from an early demise and into the world of Skyrim alone. Now, he must continue his mission, for failure means ruin for himself, his family, and all those of his house. So herein details his journey across a province at war, to rebuild from nothing and salvage his cause. He will gather wealth, knowledge, influence, and allies, and work to claw victory from the jaws of defeat, no matter the cost. Second of Hearthfire, 4E201. I made it to Castle Revelhost. We departed Riften in the morning, leaving the bee and barb behind, and taking the road northeast toward Shaw's Stone, before abandoning the easier paths and beginning our ascent into the mountains. The terrain became increasingly difficult as we climbed, the roads narrowing into rough trails. I had studied the position of Revelhost before ever setting foot in Skyrim, of course. Its location had been chosen deliberately, sufficiently isolated to conceal the movement of men and supplies, defensible and positioned between several places of strategic importance. Riften lies to the south and east, firmly within Stormcloak territory, while Windhelm and the heart of Ulfric's rebellion can be reached by travelling north through Eastmarch. From the castle heights, the hot springs and volcanic flats below spread out in the distance, while the mountains themselves protect much of the approach. On parchment, it had seemed an excellent choice. Seeing it with my own eyes confirmed that. Since Helgen, there had remained the possibility that Revelhost would be nothing more than an abandoned shell. House Renthall had acquired the place before my arrival to Skyrim, precisely so that my warband would have a discreet base of operations once we established contact with the Stormcloaks. Without us, there would have been little reason for anyone to maintain it. I had imagined broken gates, empty halls, perhaps even bandits occupying what was meant to become the center of our operation. Instead, smoke rose from chimneys, and the gates were maintained. The castle was functioning. There could be only one explanation. Osric. I found him within, and for perhaps the first time since the ambush, I abandoned the restraint I normally maintain. I greeted him openly, and with genuine affection. Osric is a Nord by birth, but his association with House Renthall predates my present mission by many years. It was Osric who discreetly arranged the acquisition of Revelhost. I was meant to arrive here with soldiers, supplies, and enough coin to turn these walls into a serious military base. Instead, I arrived with 2 adventurers and whatever equipment I could carry on my back. We spoke privately about the border ambush, Helgen, and everything that had followed. He had received no communication from my party after we crossed into Skyrim and had assumed some disaster had occurred, though he did not know its scale. I told him there were no others coming. The warband was gone. Our supplies had been burned or seized, and those who had travelled with me were dead. I explained as well that the Imperials appeared unaware of whom they had captured, and that the Stormcloaks, with the probable exception of Ulfric himself, had no idea that I, an agent of House Renthall, had even crossed the border. Ulfric had seen me alive during the execution at Helgen, but not afterward. For the moment, it remains reasonable to assume he considers me dead. Osric understood the advantage immediately. The mission has failed in its original form, but it has not ended. I told him precisely that. So long as I remain alive, House Renthall still possesses an agent in Skyrim, and so long as Revelhost remains ours, we retain a foothold from which to rebuild. Osric offered his support without hesitation. It was more reassuring than I care to admit. He is the only person in Skyrim with whom I can speak plainly about House Renthall, Ulfric, or the purpose behind my actions. Afterward, he took me through the castle. Revelhost is in better condition than I expected, though far from ready for war. Its halls are sound, the living quarters usable, the kitchens functional, and the defensive works largely intact. It possesses everything required to become the stronghold we originally envisioned. What it lacks are the things that make stone useful: personnel, stockpiles, equipment, and money. A fortress with empty armories is merely an expensive house. That evening, I sat alone for some time in the throne hall. Calling the seat there a throne is perhaps overly grand, but sitting upon it gave me perspective. The question before me is no longer whether the mission survives. It does. The question is what will be required to transform its survival into success. If House Renthall is to influence this war meaningfully, I cannot simply recruit a handful of swords and present myself to Ulfric as though nothing happened. I will need a force capable of providing what the Stormcloaks themselves lack. Hardened warriors will form its core, but they cannot be the whole of it. Battle mages will be essential. One of the primary values House Renthall offered Ulfric was access to forms of magical warfare the Stormcloaks possess only in limited numbers. Rangers will be needed for reconnaissance and operations across Skyrim's wilderness. Rogues and scouts can perform the sort of work an army cannot. Beneath them, all must eventually stand ordinary militia, men and women capable of holding ground, guarding roads, and filling ranks without costing a fortune in specialized training. Yet soldiers alone will achieve little. Armies consume resources more rapidly than almost anything else a noble house can maintain. I will need smiths, enchanters, alchemists, quartermasters, traders, scholars, healers, and craftsmen. If I am fortunate, perhaps even inventors and specialists capable of improving upon the equipment commonly available here. Castle Revelhost must become more than a barracks. It must become an institution capable of sustaining itself. And all of that requires vast coin. My present war chest consists of whatever gold I have earned by selling bandit equipment and bounties. It is almost insulting to describe it as a treasury. I will need revenue streams, property, commercial connections, and perhaps access to valuable resources. I will need equipment, not only for myself, but eventually for dozens of others. Perhaps hundreds. Better armor, enchanted weapons, horses, supplies, magical materials, fortifications, wages, bribes when necessary, gifts when preferable. There is another consideration as well: relics. History repeatedly demonstrates that Tamriel does not operate according to mundane military calculation alone. Armies have risen and fallen over artifacts, whose power could overwhelm numbers or render conventional defenses meaningless. If objects of genuine power can be recovered, they should not be left gathering dust in tombs. A single sufficiently potent artifact placed in the correct hands may accomplish more than 100 soldiers. Finally, there is influence. A private army operating in Skyrim without political support would quickly become either a threat to be destroyed or a tool to be controlled by someone else. I must establish relationships with Jarls, merchants, scholars, military figures, and other influential individuals. Thaneships, property rights, and personal reputation may prove as useful as steel. If I can become sufficiently embedded within Skyrim's institutions before revealing the true purpose of my presence, then when House Renthall finally emerges from the shadows, it will not appear as a foreign interloper. It will already be part of the machinery of the country. It is an absurd undertaking when stated plainly. At present, the great military force with which I intend to alter the course of the Skyrim civil war consists of Osric, an Argonian cutthroat, and a drunk. Every army, I suppose, must begin somewhere. We remained at Revelhost long enough to recover before setting out again. My first priority was not recruitment, but connections. I had earlier agreed to assist a Psijic caravan guard named Karja, whose amulet had been stolen by bandits. The Psijic caravans are mobile commercial networks capable of carrying unusual goods across the province, and because Skyrim's cities largely refuse them entry, they operate somewhat outside the normal mercantile structure. This makes them valuable. Exotic goods, rare ingredients, perhaps information. Such caravans may eventually provide all three. Recovering one guard's personal trinket is a small investment if it purchases goodwill with those networks. Our quarry had taken shelter at Robber's Gorge in Whiterun Hold. Sophia, Matthias, and I reached the stronghold, prepared for a prolonged engagement, but speed proved more useful than caution. The bandits had archers positioned around the approach and had prepared falling boulder traps to punish anyone advancing through the obvious path. Rather than allow them time to use either effectively, we rushed them. Sophia was first among them, as usual, with the alarming enthusiasm. Matthias provided crossbow fire from behind, while I closed the distance. The defenders at the entrance fell before they could properly organize. Once inside, we pressed directly toward their leader and eliminated him before the remaining bandits could form a coherent defense. After recovering Karjo's amulet and gathering what equipment could be sold, we returned to Whiterun, where I finally fulfilled the request Gerda had made after Helgen. I approached the Jarl and reported the dragon attack. By then, the warning was hardly urgent. Sightings had already placed Whiterun on alert. Still, reporting what I had personally witnessed gave the court some confirmation of events. The Jarl attempted to draw me further into the matter, offering what sounded like work for his court wizard concerning the dragons. I declined. I may come to regret that decision. Dragons returning from extinction should perhaps command greater attention than I am presently giving them. Yet I cannot allow every mystery I encounter to pull me away from the central objective. Chasing ancient myths because a court mage finds them interesting does not serve my immediate needs. Still, the encounter made something clear. Working for Jarls could become a valuable method of building legitimacy. I should not make a habit of refusing them. Rather, I should begin with the smaller holds where advancement may be easier. A Thane is not merely a glorified local champion. The title carries recognition, access, and a measure of political legitimacy. With that in mind, we headed south toward Falkreath. The town itself offered little grandeur. Its people live in the shadow of an enormous cemetery, and the entire hold carries a strangely somber air. I began deliberately with trivial work, deliveries, favors, small problems for townsfolk whose names will never be recorded in histories. The coin was almost meaningless, but the coin was not the point. Reputation is often built more effectively through 10 small acts witnessed by ordinary people than one grand action understood only by nobles. More serious work soon followed. We were asked to deal with bandits at Knife Point Ridge and recover a journal belonging to the local priest from Bloated Man's Grotto. Knife Point Ridge proved straightforward. We attacked at night, using darkness to approach before the camp could fully respond. The three of us cleared the place methodically, eliminating the sentries, pushing into the camp, and eventually killing their leader. The journey north toward Bloated Man's Grotto proved stranger than the bandit camp itself. In the darkness, we encountered several armed men chasing a completely naked Nord along the road. The pursuers looked like bandits at first glance, though I heard them refer to themselves as the Silver Hand. The name meant nothing to me. We intervened, dispatching them before they could finish their prey. I expected gratitude. Instead, the naked man became angry and demanded that we stay away from him. Considering we had just prevented him from being cut apart on the roadside, his hostility struck me as particularly unreasonable. We left him there. Ungrateful sod. Not much farther along, I saw a figure standing in an open field. At first, I assumed it was simply another traveller. Then I noticed the faint, unnatural glow around it and the stillness with which it watched us. The figure began moving closer. Only when it emerged sufficiently from the darkness did I realize I was looking at a vampire. I have read of them, but knowledge from books is very different from watching one approach you across a moonlit field. When it rushed us, instinct took over. I threw flames at it, scorching its clothing and forcing it sideways. Before it could recover, Matthias fired. The bolt struck directly through the chest. The force of the shot threw the creature backward, and it did not rise again. I looked at Matthias afterward, and then at the crossbow. An impressive shot. Bloated Man's Grotto itself was more dangerous. Wolves prowled the outer passages, but deeper inside, we discovered something unexpected. An altar upon which rested an unusually fine blade, accompanied by a note. The writer claimed to have belonged to the Blades and spoke of being hunted by the Thalmor, asking that whoever found the weapon continue the struggle. I know something of the Blades. Once they served the Empire and its dragonborn rulers, though in earlier ages their order concerned itself heavily with dragons. Their history is tangled with imperial power, which does little to endear them to my present mission. But hatred of the Thalmor is a considerably more useful quality. The dead man wanted his blade used against them. I believe I can accommodate that request eventually. I took the weapon. Recovering the priest's journal was easy. Leaving with it was not. The grotto's true guardians revealed themselves only after we had moved deep within. Spriggans. Their attacks were unlike those of ordinary creatures. Roots and strange natural magic. It was not always clear where an attack originated until it had already landed. I took several serious wounds, and Sophia did little better. We fought our way out, but only after consuming more healing potions than I would have preferred. The encounter stayed with me afterward. I have spent much of the past week thinking about the forces I need to build. Soldiers, money, experts, allies. Yet I am myself still a weakness in the structure. My training in High Rock was extensive, but extensive does not mean complete. I am better than I was when I entered Helgen's tunnels, certainly, but Skyrim continues to throw powerful enemies my way. If I expect to command the sort of power necessary to influence this war, I must improve myself as deliberately as I improve Revelhost. That realization led naturally to Winterhold. I had heard much of its college before arriving in Skyrim. A great institution of magical learning, isolated in the north, whose reputation appears to inspire almost as much distrust among ordinary Nords as respect among mages. That distrust interested me almost as much as the knowledge itself. A powerful institution alienated from the society around it can often be influenced by someone willing to value what others reject. We rested first at the Dead Man's Drink in Falkreath, while I tended the wounds received in the grotto. Before sleep, I took a moment for something I have neglected too often since the border. I gave quiet thanks to Hermaeus Mora. My lord has remained at the edge of my thoughts through these past days, though survival and practical necessities have frequently driven contemplation aside. Yet knowledge has already shaped nearly every useful decision I have made in Skyrim. Whether Mora guided my steps toward Winterhold, or merely approves of where they have led, I cannot know. Perhaps there is little difference. Winterhold was colder than anything I had properly prepared for. The wind seems almost deliberately hostile there, tearing across the ruined town and freezing exposed skin within moments. The settlement itself is a shadow. There are buildings enough to suggest that it was once substantial, but much of it is simply gone. Above what remains stands the college, separated from Winterhold by a narrow bridge, and appearing almost untouched by the devastation that consumed everything around it. At the entrance, a mage demanded that I demonstrate a spell before being admitted. The test was simple. I performed it and expected merely to be permitted access to the grounds. Instead, I found myself enrolled. The college is far more organized than I anticipated. New students are gathered into cohorts, instructed by senior mages, and expected to participate in lessons and practical studies. My first formal lesson dealt with wards. The fundamentals were familiar, but I would be arrogant to claim there was nothing useful in it. Even familiar magic can be refined, and the instructors here understand techniques that differ from those I learned in High Rock. Over the following days, I allowed myself to become a student in earnest. I explored the library extensively. The Arcanium alone may justify the journey north. Its shelves contain histories, magical studies, and obscure works from across Tamriel. The college maintains alchemical facilities, enchanting stations and stores of magical materials that would be expensive or difficult to assemble privately. I attended several lessons, spoke with other mages, and spent a considerable amount of gold purchasing direct training from senior wizards. That expense will have to become routine. Skill is another form of equipment, and often the most valuable one. While staying in Winterhold, I also continued taking local work. Bounties provided useful coin and helped familiarize me with the northern coast, though traveling the region on foot was miserable. I have now firmly concluded that a horse is no longer a luxury. One particularly interesting task came directly from Jarl Korea. He asked me to recover an old helm from the wreck of the Pride of Telvos, apparently believing possession of the artifact would strengthen his political standing. I can hardly fault the reasoning. Symbols matter, especially to rulers whose actual power is limited. Reaching the wreck required crossing water so cold it felt as though the flesh were being burned rather than frozen. I will remember that experience the next time anyone describes swimming as fun. Bandits had occupied the wreck, because apparently there is no location in Skyrim too remote, frozen or structurally unsound for bandit vermin to establish themselves. We killed them, recovered the helm, and returned it to the Jarl. It was minor work, but useful. Another ruler now knows my name, or at least the fake one I throw at them. My studies changed dramatically when Tolfdir gathered several of us for an expedition to an ancient Nordic ruin called Saarthal. I accepted immediately. Books are useful, but ruins preserve things. Books often fail to explain. If I intend to operate throughout Skyrim, understanding Nordic burial sites, their construction and their dangers will prove essential. The expedition quickly became something more significant. After entering the ruin and assisting with the initial examination, I uncovered a hidden passage. There, without warning, the world seemed to stop around me. A figure appeared, an apparition perhaps, or some form of projected vision. It identified itself through association with the Psijic order and warned me that events had been set in motion which could not easily be stopped. More troublingly, the message appeared to be intended for me alone. When the vision vanished, Tolfdir had seen nothing. I have read of the Psijic order. Few magical institutions possess a reputation for knowledge surpassing the college itself. That one of their number could reach me inside an ancient Nordic ruin without physically being present is remarkable enough. That they chose to do so is more concerning. We pressed onward. Draugr emerged repeatedly from their crypts as we descended. They are becoming an increasingly familiar enemy, though familiarity has not made them pleasant. Eventually, we reached the ruin's central chamber, and there we found something I lacked the language to properly describe. An enormous orb suspended within the chamber, covered in intricate markings and radiating immense magical power. A powerful Draugr guarded it, somehow protected by the energy of the object itself. Our attacks accomplished little, until Tolfdir recognized the connection and disrupted the magic shielding the creature. Once its protection failed, we brought it down quickly. Tolfdir immediately understood that the discovery exceeded the importance of an ordinary archaeological expedition. He asked me to return to the college and report directly to Archmage Savos Aran. Savos received the account with measured skepticism, though I sensed his interest beneath it. Tolfdir is sufficiently respected that the Archmage could not simply dismiss his judgment, and the description of the orb demanded investigation. I was instructed to begin researching the object, and I agreed without hesitation. The assignment brought me back to the Arcaneum and its keeper, Urag Groshub. Urag is not an easy man to speak with. He possesses the temperament of someone who considers every person entering his library a potential threat to the books. I cannot say I disapprove. Whatever his personality, he is clearly competent and fiercely protective of the college's accumulated knowledge. His research suggested that several relevant texts had been stolen by rogue mages and taken to Felglow Keep. If we wanted answers, those books would need to be recovered. So, another expedition awaits. As I prepared to leave Winterhold, a variety of distractions hit me. A courier delivered a letter from Jarl Siggeir of Falkreath. My work in his hold has apparently reached his attention, and the letter strongly implied that continued service could lead to recognition as Thane. This is precisely what I intended when I began accepting those seemingly insignificant tasks. Another letter came from some Nord claiming to possess property he intends to leave to a true warrior, provided someone comes and proves themselves in combat. I assume he has instructed couriers to distribute these messages indiscriminately to anyone carrying a weapon. It sounds idiotic. I kept the letter regardless. Idiotic men occasionally own valuable property. Then, almost immediately after leaving town, we were approached by an orc named Durak. He claimed to represent an order recruiting warriors to hunt vampires. According to him, vampires have become increasingly aggressive and had even destroyed a place called the Hall of the Vigilant. Given our recent encounter, I do not doubt some threat exists. Yet the vampire we killed hardly represented a province-wide catastrophe, and I have no intention of allowing every militant order with an urgent cause to recruit me into their affairs. I declined. My affairs are urgent enough. We traveled south again, eventually reaching Shaw's Stone without further trouble. There I discovered that the settlement's mine had been infested with spiders. What surprised me was not the infestation, but the apparent lack of action from anyone responsible for the region's administration. This is an valuable ebony mine, and yet production had effectively stopped because no one had dispatched a handful of armed men to clear oversized vermin. If this is representative of governance in Stormcloak-aligned territory, I better understand why their war effort requires outside support. I volunteered. Partly for the coin, though the miners paid surprisingly well. More importantly, an operational ebony mine so close to Revelhost is something I want functioning. Riften benefits from its output, and Riften presently supports Ulfric. More locally, a prosperous Shaw's Stone benefits the region surrounding my own castle. Poor settlements become desperate settlements, and desperate settlements create bandits, smugglers, and instability. A settlement with working mines and paid workers is far easier to live beside. The spiders themselves were trivial. We cleared the mine within minutes. Afterward, we remained near the settlement as evening approached. I spent some time speaking with the miners and with my companions around the fire. Their arguments and jokes were mundane, but useful in their own way. If Revelhost is to operate here permanently, these people will effectively become our neighbors. One miner, Sylgia, told me she had suffered a bad fall and asked whether I could carry a package to her parents at Darkwater Crossing. I accepted. We have already passed through the settlement, and it lies close enough that the task costs me little. More importantly, there is value in being known locally as someone who assists rather than merely occupies a fortress above their homes. Sophia revealed something interesting as well. She once studied at the College of Winterhold, but was expelled. I believe this may be the least surprising revelation she has made, since I found her asleep without trousers in Whiterun stables. Yet listening to her explain it, I found myself oddly appreciative of her presence. Sophia's constant irreverence can be exhausting, but it also lightens the mood. Sitting beside the fire, I considered the college again, not just as a place where I can improve my own magic, but as an institution. The college is isolated from the political life of Skyrim and mistrusted by much of the Nord population. Its leadership appears committed to neutrality, likely because involvement in political affairs would worsen already hostile relations with Winterhold and the rest of the province. Yet neutrality is a choice, not a law of nature. The Stormcloaks are painfully deficient in magical support. Their soldiers are fierce, but most are conventional warriors. Imperial forces possess battle mages, institutional experience, and the resources of a continent-spanning military system. One reason Ulfric was willing to negotiate with House Renthall in the first place was our ability to provide capabilities his own forces lack. The college could solve part of that problem. Not today, or even soon. Its present administration would never openly attach itself to the rebellion. But administrations change. If I rise within the college, then perhaps its neutrality can gradually become less absolute. At minimum, access to its enchanters, magical artifacts, spellcraft, and trained mages could benefit my own forces at Revelhost. At maximum, the college itself could become a strategic asset, supplying enchanted weapons, magical expertise, and battle mages to a Stormcloak war effort, presently starved of all three. And if such aid were arranged through me, then its loyalty would not truly belong to Ulfric. It would belong to the network I am constructing around House Renthall. That possibility alone makes continued involvement worthwhile. We have now returned to Castle Revelhost, where I write this entry in quarters considerably more comfortable than the inns that have housed me since Helgen. Osric has continued his work in my absence, though every empty rack in the armory and every unused bed in the barracks reminds me of the scale of what remains to be done. Still, there is progress. I have coin enough that I am no longer worried about tomorrow's meal. I possess companions who have proven themselves repeatedly in battle. Falkreath's Jarl has already taken notice of my actions. Winterhold's Jarl knows my name, or at least the fake name I have been using. The college has admitted me. Its masters are training me, and I have already found myself involved in a discovery important enough to command the attention of its archmage. Truthfully, the orb beneath Saarthal troubles me. The Psijic warning alone would make it significant. I agreed to investigate it because doing so serves my position within the college. But I would be lying to myself if I claimed politics were now my only interest. I want to know what it is and what it can do. I'm sure my lord would too.